A single human warship crosses the border of the galaxy's most powerful empire. In command centers, alien overlords freeze, and their eyes go wide. All scanners verify the unthinkable. The ship is real, and it's unstoppable. Urgent orders ring out. Panic ripples through every outpost. We arrive at their doorstep. Now, go. The moment the reports verified the incursion of the human warship, the alien overlords sensed their confidence falter. Their dominion stretched across a myriad of stars, maintained by fleets that had quashed countless uprisings. They had challenged no species. But now, this single boat, human-made, was illogically materialized deep here in restricted territory. Frantic communiques ricocheted around every command center, each one underscored with the same incredulity. How could a single craft carry so far unopposed? Leaders of the Grand Council called for an immediate crisis meeting. They looked at the sensor readouts, amazed by the signature of the warship's power. Its energy output dwarfing that of most standard battleships, suggesting an advanced reactor. Weapon data was similarly vague. Speculation ranged from high-tech railguns to mystery modules for stealth. Some thought these humans, who had once languished in the Empire's shadow, had somehow rediscovered lost technology. The mere thought sent a shiver down the spine of every official in the room. The Overlord's iron rule had considered humanity backwards. Humans, although they were tough fighters, did not have the resources to construct ships that compared to an Imperial dreadnought. Over the centuries, their dispersed colonies were beaten down or taxed to death. Now the Overlords discovered that, somewhere in the shadows, humanity must have acquired capabilities beyond standard scans. The Empire searched the frontier in great detail, but they failed to see the rise of this new warship. Panic extended to the outer garrisons, all unsure if the human craft would target them next. Governors had called for more troops, and admirals rushed to set defense lines. Alerts over safety soared to the highest level. Ally species that once benefited from the Overlord's strength now filed milksop queries, afraid that this turn of events might spark universal warfare. For the first time in generations, the Empire's leaders were up against a foe that was neither known nor knowable. There was a rumor of sabotage by dissidents, of an insurrectionist cabal that had hijacked an alien dreadnought and refitted it in Earth's colors. Another theory had humans accessing ancient relics said to be hidden on worlds unknown. Skeptics called such talk nonsense, but the Empire had no better explanation. And so speculation grew, each rumor deepening the anxiety. After some few moments of agitated discussion, tension mounted 5, and the Overlords dispatched their fastest reconnaissance frigate to intercept the intruder, gather intelligence, and confirm its flight path. But early efforts to shadow the warship were unsuccessful. Scouts also reported anomalous energy traffic patterns that baffled tracking systems. One moment, the human vessel disappeared from sensors only to appear thousands of kilometers away the next. That the warship must therefore be equipped with jamming technology or warp jump capabilities with a very short range, accomplishes no one thought they could produce on Earth. In shadowy starbases light years from the seat of power, local authorities prepared for an assault. Some established blockades, though they were vague on what the intruder's true goal was. Did it come as a messenger? Or was this the opening real salvo in a bold invasion? For decades, the Overlords had been crushing rebellious planets. The notion that humans might finally be able to turn the tables with a single warship seemed preposterous, but the evidence lurked at every turn. Empire news outlets turned alarmist, describing possible raids on core systems. For millennia, these citizens of land under imperial subjugation had convinced themselves humanity was tamed. That news rattled them, exposing a potential for unstoppable defiance. A handful of rebellious enclaves quietly celebrated, wishing this human warship's Illyrian might would herald liberation from Overlord tyranny. Even after the shock, the Overlords remained a formidable power. Their fleets, despite being dispersed, dwarfed any lone force the humans could muster. Logically, they concluded that, if pressed, the warship would be destroyed easily. But logic was of little comfort, as every new sensor ping suggested cornering this intruder would not be easy. A rock-solid foundation for centuries, the Empire's pride began to crack under a tide of uncertainty. Urgent communiques flew flak from the central palace, demanding local admirals assemble for a grand blockade. The Empire's commanders sought to appear strong and contain the warship in layers of battleships to guarantee it had little chance of escape. But in private, they worried. If the warship was sophisticated enough to breach the Empire's outer defenses undetected, why not slip by blockades as well? The Overlords' previously unshakable dominance was put to a test no one had foreseen. And listen, as preparations hit a fever pitch, and watchers at remote outposts murmured of humans, at long last, taking their rightful place among the stars. Only time would determine if this brazen incursion led to disaster or sparked a cosmic shift in power. For the first time we would remember, the Overlords felt the burn of real fear. Nothing could stop what was coming for their throne, painted in silence under humanity's flag of war. Tension and steadfast determination lived among the sleek corridors of the human warship. It was a mission unlike any that humanity had had the courage to attempt. The crew knew that they carried not just weapons, but also the hopes of 1 million colonists trapped under the aliens' boot. Stories of violent overlord dominance had drifted back to Earth for decades, spurring demands to retaliate. With limited resources but unending ingenuity, this state-of-the-art warship came into being, the solitary beacon of mankind's determination to live free. Its core mission was classified even to most of those on board. Some speculated the warship had come to deliver a grim ultimatum: leave human worlds or be met with a retaliation that would be impossible to stop. Others feared a direct show of force, crippling a key imperial bastion to force negotiations. A few murmured of a last, bolder scheme: topple the Overlords and unleash a wave of revolt through their empire. Whatever the warship's actual purpose, it drove ahead with unabated resolve. At its heart were cutting-edge reactors, energizing next-level shield arrays. Scientists had perfected stealth systems enough that Imperial sensors failed. The warship's armament included rail cannons that were rumored to launch slugs at near-relativistic speeds, and energy lances capable of punching through heavy dreadnought armor. On paper, the Empire's fleets outmatched any single human ship. Yet this vessel's power shifted the odds in unexpected ways. Still, the warship, despite its advanced design, was no invincible juggernaut. The corridors hummed quietly with intensity. Crew members checked and rechecked system after system, realizing that a single malfunction is enough to kill them all. Earth's complete investment in this risky bet meant no reinforcements would arrive. If they did not succeed, the oppressors would tighten their hold on human outposts. The crew took the risk with silent pride, resolved not to fail where so many had failed. Among them, rumors spread of what was next. Some speculated they would aim for the Empire's capital station to transmit a message of defiance. Some speculated they'd take out a vital communications node, cutting the chain of command for the Overlords. It was, literally, a matter of time, and every passing hour brought them closer to confrontation. The Empire was already mobilizing, great lines of warships forming a net around central systems. Avoiding or matching that net required unmeasurable cunning. On the warship's bridge, morale soared. If we can't get them quaking, the pilot joked quietly, it's reward enough for the centuries of struggle on Earth. Tactical officers described scenarios, one more risky than the next. There was an air of possibility in the atmosphere. While dread hovered in every shadow, it was outgunned by the determined belief that, finally, humanity could take control of its fate. From the outside, distant sensors warned them of increasing enemy signals. Alien frigates scouted forward, looking for any indication of the warship's track. Cloaking fields shifted, halting heat emission. They flitted between sensor sweeps, periodically launching small decoys that mimicked random flares, obfuscating things even further for Imperial watchers. From there, the warship plowed onward, carving its way into once impenetrable tracks. In the warship's tiny med bay, the chief was aware of the toll taken. Crewways told tales of families stranded on colonized worlds, yearning to be freed. Each individual story underscored the stakes of this incursion. Success could mean the renewed hope of entire populations. Failure brought swift punishment from overlord armies. Everybody understood the seriousness of the load borne on the warship's hull. Night shift riveters on the bridge glimpsed the Empire's star-dotted territories twinkling far away. They pictured their alien overlords who thought they were invincible. Now, humankind's last gamble rocketed over those same halls. But not a single transmission was sent. The warship flew in solemn silence, delivering a message words could not convey. As the incursion approached the first big challenge, the crew braced for the Empire's retaliation. They were ready to unleash the warship's lethal potential if negotiations or caution were not effective. Humans had learned the hard way, through past humiliations, never to underestimate alien power. But now, an unexpected opportunity had arisen. To reverse the narrative, to rise up in the Overlord's most sacred ground, and to reassert to the galaxy that Earth never really surrendered. Hardly had the human ship broken free of the outer defenses when the first alien battle group smashed into them, desperate to intercept. The Overlords had scrambled a veritable battalion of cruisers and escorts, each one bristling with plasma cannons. The plan was straightforward: coordinate a massive barrage to overwhelm the intruders' shields. Admirals expecting standard human technology anticipated an easy victory. But the warship would not play ball on predictable terms. Rather than exchanging long-range fire, it darted into the flank of the enemy formation, maneuvering through scattered asteroid wreckage. The Overlord's sensors stuttered, losing accurate target lock. Their meticulously honed volley went awry, searing empty space. Seizing the moment, the warship opened fire, unleashing its forward rail cannons. Within seconds, a pair of cruisers exploded into molten shards. A shocked silence fell over the alien comms channels. The Overlords had never seen a human vessel maneuver with such precision. Frantic orders demanded reinforcements. But the warship kept moving, turning to face the next wave before they could recover. Its energy lances pierced through the cruiser's shields, blowing through hull after hull with jarring speed. The surviving escorts scattered, unprepared for such a devastation of firepower. This initial clash brought a sobering lesson. The old assumption that human vessels were simply outclassed and firepower no longer applied. From distant outposts, observers watched in disbelief as the lines of aliens stuttered and broke under unrelenting assault. Liberated from ordinary constraints, the warship acted like a scalpel, carving its way through the miasma of confusion. Even the Empire's fiercest captains, who fought lesser enemies, fell back stunned by its unstoppable drive. The Overlord's flagship followed, surrounded by a squadron of battleships. Thinking numbers would box in the interloper, they had formed a bulwark near a gravitational anomaly. But that warship was an exploitation of its very anomaly, skimming its edges. The Overlords hesitated, remembering that hazards could bend projectiles. All that pause did was allow the warship time to maneuver, directing rail bursts, heavy, at the battleships. One battleship's reactor ignited the void into a catastrophic explosion that rattled its fellows. Warship crew focused calmly around them, with accurate tactical readouts directing actions. They understood that the Empire brought massive force to bear, but also understood that the Overlords were laggards in the action-reaction cycle. Their long period of easy dominance dulled their ability to respond quickly and flexibly. Its pilot vector shifted unpredictably, leaving the enemy chasing illusions. Fights erupted in empty pockets of space, each skirmish closing with alien vessels wrecked and the warship vanishing into the dark before the bulk of its fleet came together. Alien morale wavered. Some captains wanted to withdraw to stronger lines, not wanting to risk any more humiliating losses. Others called for a furious charge. Neither approach was successful. The warship evaded wild attacks and peppered defensive formations, wearing them down. News of these humiliations trickled through the Empire's channels, fueling fears that perhaps the warship wasn't the only one of its kind. Could there be a bigger invasion being staged by Earth? In reality, the warship had stood alone, a solitary spearhead. But threats of a greater danger worked in its favor, blinding the alien admirals to the truth. They saw the warship was heading farther into the core worlds of the Empire. Fear won out over reason. If they did not stop this intruder at the border, it could hit vital infrastructure. And the Overlords ordered every available squadron to converge, heedless of operational prudence. Whole sectors were abandoned to save security for systems further away. Deceit underlay these human maneuvers. Every feint, every engagement pulled the Empire into pursuing false goals or mound itself fleet in bad places. No single battle decimated the alien ranks, but the warship dealt brutal damage, cracking the facade of invincibility that the Overlords had long enjoyed. Wrecks battered to pieces drifted helplessly, rescue signals drowned by the irresistible form stitching its way onward, reports said. After numerous near misses, the warship arrived at an Imperial nexus, a ring station that controlled significant supply routes. Here, the Overlords gathered their mightiest force to date, a fearsome blockade. Defensive turrets peppered the ring station's exterior, creating a deadly perimeter. By any measure, a charge-in was suicide. But the warship pressed on, undaunted. The last battle of this phase erupted in a storm of energy beams. The warship's shield sparked, beaten by concentrated fire. Nearby crews held fast against violent shaking. But the aircraft held a steady course, lashing back with deadly accuracy. As the sights spanned across multiple star systems tuned in, they watched the Empire's fortress lines dissolve under relentless rail strikes. The entire region fell silent. The alien Overlord, seeing battered cruisers and crumbling defenses for the first time in what seemed like ages, were forced to contemplate the unthinkable. Their empire was not going to last forever. The warship had thus far proven impossible to stop, and it was still pushing on. The Overlords had never experienced such weakness. In preparing for this next wave, they discovered that the humans had changed the rules of engagement, and they had no ready answer for them. When word broke in the Imperial seat that their home ring station teetered on the brink of defeat, the Overlords convened an emergency summit. The haughty airs that were once on display were gone. Fear flashed in every gaze. This lone human warship had outmaneuvered fleets. It shouldn't have happened, logically. Logically, the Empire's collective strength costed anything humanity could provide. And yet logic had let them down. Now, a high-stakes gamble had coalesced. Summoning their top admirals, the Overlords ordered an all-or-nothing counterstrike. They built the Empire's most powerful capital ships, some said to wield forbidden weaponry. The Garrets rarely saw combat. Nobody had dared threaten the Overlords in centuries. Now, with humiliation knocking at their door, they released them. The strategy: coax the warship into a pre-designated kill box by pretending to flee, then drown it in inescapable fire. If top strategists were the soul of this trap, they demanded it have many layers. In its first phase, carve out a path in the atmosphere that guides the human craft to critical infrastructure. Phase 2. Cocoon advanced warships behind cloaked asteroid facilities. Phase 3. Trigger the trap when the warship came within range. Overlords sought premised on raw firepower, eventually overwhelming even advanced shielding. They speculated about the possible use of a star-rending super laser, but official admission was rare. As the Overlord's premier armada gathered, petty admirals scoured ravaged frontline sectors, gathering up every working vessel that still was able to deliver weaponry. Morale was shaky. Crews had witnessed or heard how easy the warship tore through standard formations. But the top command hammered home the message that only unity and overwhelming force could restore the Empire's dignity. Sensing the stakes, many went along, if with subdued dread. In the meantime, the human warship, recently rung with both glory and partial victory at the ring station, advanced. Scans indicated that an atypical lull lurked around the corner. The standard patrol routes lay hauntingly vacant, as though the Overlords had given up on the next line of defense. The warship's tactical officers sensed an ambush, but the entire mission from Earth depended on going deeper. If they tarried, the Empire could regroup and entrench behind them. So the crew prepared for the worst, confident in their wiles and systems. The warship slid through silent fields of star stuff, encountering little but the empty void. As expected, an artificial stillness prevailed. Thereafter, subtle gravitational anomalies spiked on sensors. The pilot veered, and new readings came up, an entire armada decloaking amid drifting asteroids. They encircled the warship. The final showdown began. Monolithic capital ships, wedge-shaped like giants' blades, fired. Streams of supergranular plasma came together. The warship's shield was pulsing under extreme pressure. On the bridge, Consoles glowed red with warnings. One direct hit got through, burning a section of outer armor. It was the Empire's first proper punch. The Overlords were having the desired effect, but the warship would not back down. It had the flight path of an arrow. It ducked and rolled close to asteroid debris to break line of sight from half the capital ships. Turrets, sheathed in specialized drones, hammered the closest foes with several coordinated bursts of rail. 2 capital ships are on the list, venting atmosphere, as the rest of the capital ships returned fire. The warship's shield flickered dangerously, but the pilot dove deeper into the tangled field, forcing the Overlords to risk friendly collisions. The enemy captains grew frustrated. Their trap had ensnared a perfect first shot, but the warship still lived. Misses by each alien volley risked hitting Allied hulls. The warship played on that fear, maneuvering so any wide beam could fell a comrade. Gradually, the indomitable boat weaponized the Overlords' numerical supremacy against them, exploiting the cramped milieu to disrupt their organization. Feeling that the ambush might not work, an Admiral Overlord authorized the use of a rumored super laser. A charging hum rang on every frequency, building to a spine-chilling crescendo. Observers understood that if the warship were caught in beam's path, it would simply be vaporized. But the warship's sensors had also detected the ominous energy spike. Astronavigation, the weapon's line of fire, it unleashed a timed barrage of high-velocity slugs at the reactor shield of the charging vessel. It sparked a cataclysmic chain reaction. When the beam weapon achieved a peak output, the deck/pack slugs penetrated the shielded plating. The feedback loop of the super laser has triggered an internal meltdown of sorts, destroying the capital ship from within. The entire battlefield was rocked by shockwaves. The explosion that followed engulfed several Allied cruisers. The Overlord's greatest gamble was a fatal misfire. Now panic truly took hold. With their ultimate weapon gone, the Overlords lost their last guarantee of domination. The human warship exploited the disarray, striking the largest capital vessels with deadly accuracy. One by one, these behemoths whirled out of control, slashed open by unending rail fire. It began, the subduing vessels trembling with unstoppable fury, withdrawing in hastily constructed lines of retreat. Yet the Overlords wouldn't give in. Yet another wave of smaller but more maneuverable cruisers made desperate ramming runs, no doubt hoping to bury the warship beneath its own mass. The pilot's reflexes flared. Every new attacker was either wrecked or dodged with negligible shields drain. The bloodshed became impossible to ignore. This was what the Overlords had staked all their chips on, and yet again, the human invaders did not break. The decisive moment approached, as the warship refocused onto the flagship directing this massive assault. Realizing it was their turn, the Overlords attempted to call back their battered squads. But morale had collapsed. Most of the alien crews saw no sense in persisting in a losing cause. The way lay clear to the flagship, the warship's weapon arrays glimmering to life. In the Overlord's command deck, one crushing truth settled in. There was no escaping the final blow. Now stripped of the panicking escorts that had obscured it, the Overlord's flagship loomed in open space. A massive fortress crowned with cannons and heavy armor. A final line of guardians formed a loose perimeter, but their ranks quaked. The human warship charged, weapons cycling to maximum. Every sensor reading spiked. Observers across the star system knew the decisive strike was about to play out. On the command deck of the flagship, high officials shouted orders, sending wave after wave of torpedoes. Beams coordinated in a last-ditch effort to vaporize the intruder. The warship's shield took the brunt of it, flickering under the intense attack, but holding. The answer was rail cannons, booming out kinetic slugs that shredded through frigates like tissue paper. The flagship's defenders felt dread blossom. In the other direction, the pilot executed a daring timing, swinging around a group of dead cruisers that were floating in the aftermath of earlier fighting. The flagship's massive guns were too slow to track, missing key windows. The ship's rail guns hammered any turret that was active. Explosions bloomed along the flagship's hull, vents of superheated plasma illuminating the void in brilliant cascades. Panic calls for backup echoed on alien comm channels, but when answered, the Empire's armies had scattered or been obliterated. Sensing the inevitable, A few defenders staged desperate attacks, ramming half-destroyed cruisers into the warship's path. The pilot avoided them with almost supernatural agility. Each collision attempt hit only drifting wreckage or disintegrated to a final, pitiless barrage from the ship's turrets. With each heartbeat, the relentless vessel drew ever closer to the flagship's heart. At last, the warship picked a soft spot on the flagship's reactor assembly, discerned with a series of scanning pulses. It ripped into that sector with a volley of accurately placed slugs. Power distribution in the alien fortress was crippled by internal explosions that rocked the alien fortress from within. Full decks lost gravity, defenders flailing in zero-G carnage. Even with advanced failsafes, the flagship's formerly proud hull fractured across multiple sections. The Overlords were desperate. They enabled self-destruct protocols, wanting to deny humanity a possible trophy. But the warship's sensors detected the surge of meltdown signals. And yet when it moved too fast for us, severing key meltdown relays with pinpoint railgun shots, stopping the chain reaction. That last act of control highlighted the warship's domination simply from any threat. The Overlords, trapped in a rotten castle with no way out, stared in horror. Then came the final blow. The ship's main energy lance charged to full capacity, building up a beam that stabbed through the flagship's centerline. Gaps of flame and molten metal rippled outward. A deafening explosion engulfed hull compartments, venting atmosphere in spirals of churning gas. The Overlord's command deck was consumed in the inferno. The new, rudderless fortress started to drift apart, in pieces that floated like detritus on the battlefield. All around, the wreckage of the Imperial fleet was reeling from the cataclysm. Crews on smaller ships understood that there was no sense in continuing the battle. They shut down engines, broadcasting surrender pings, or fleeing at full speed. The unrelenting warship cruised above the stricken flagship, searching for lingering threats. None materialized. The Overlord's mightiest bastion crumbled in ruins, preventing pursuit for now. A silence fell over the star system. Survivors from mangled alien cruisers gazed at the Conqueror's silhouette, assented to an unreturnable power shift. The chain of command among the Overlords had eroded. Fleets, confident, by dawn drifted by days end as wreckage. The news left observers in allied or neutral lands. Gasping, a single human warship had dealt a devastating blow to the Empire's pride and power. When some of the debris had settled, the warship returned its cloak. After one last scan, it turned away from the wreckage. Others feared it could overtake the region outright. But it left, leaving only devastation in its wake. This single act demonstrated that the warship's mission was more ambitious than a petty conquest. It had made a case for humanity's strength and left the Overlords to contend with their demise. News of this final stroke spread even faster than light, transmitted by every skip lane and subspace report. Fear spread across the Empire's distant lands. Governors wondered whether their worlds would soon follow. Silently oppressed species jubilated, seeing in that blazing victory a cessation of Overlord oppression. A new epoch dawned. The Overlords, so omnipotent, were on the verge of annihilation, brought down by a single visiting ship they had so nonchalantly devalued. And there was no victory cheer that escaped the hull of the human craft. Inside its corridors, the crew knew many dangers lay ahead. But for now, they flew away from the burning wreck, bruised but unbroken. The Overlords had learned a lesson they would not forget. Humanity would never bow or disappear into the past. With that final blow, they split the Empire's illusion of invincibility, opening a path into a future none could wholly guess. Under the pale embers of drifting star systems was a destroyed star sphere, once core holdings of the Overlords. Scraps of capital ships winked in the void, testament to a broken empire's pride. Distress calls to home sections for salvage would go out from survivors among the broken fleets. From the smoking ruins came the realization. The Overlord's reign had taken an irreversible beating. The human warship's victory sent shockwaves throughout the far reaches of the Empire's territory. Planetary governors, who were used to dispatching tributes and troops to the Imperial core, began to doubt their future. Could they maintain authority without the Overlord's iron boot? Quashed into submission, rebellious factions began to stir again. Rumors of insurrection erupted. On distant planets, Jubilant celebrations erupted, chanting that humankind's triumph was shared by all who longed to be free. Other aliens who had always seen humankind as a second-rate species watched with astonished respect. Most had colluded with the overlords in fear, thinking resistance was hopeless. The bold incursion of this warship defied that idea. Diplomats raced to renege on alliances, others contacting Earth for new accords. If one ship could shatter the Empire's spine, maybe creating a balanced galaxy wasn't a fantasy, but a real possibility. Inside the Overlord's inner circles, panic collided with denial. Competing power blocks formed, each accusing the other of the fiasco. Others called for revenge, for a renewed rampage against Earth before they formed a new front. Some pushed for withdrawal, defending the Empire's core. But the unstoppable show left them reeling. Belief in the Empire's omnipotence broken, supplanted by debilitating doubt. Compact Earth, and its disparate colonies, was at once gripped with a tentative hope. News of the warship's successes came in fragmented streams, but the bottom line was apparent. The Empire's blockade crumbled at the hand of a single vessel. Fans of humanity cheered. The crew's families cried tears of relief. The leaders spoke to massive audiences, saying the victory wasn't about conquest. It was about showing humans had never again been a species to be trifled with. Public pride soared, tempered by the sobering reality that revenge from certain quarters was a given. Other species rumored to be under overlord oppression, quietly seizing their opportunity for revolt. Whispers circulated through underground channels that if humankind could take such brazen action, maybe there was opportunity to displace local governors, too. The cells of resistance started to synchronize new operations, wondering if Earth would join them in a wider push. Each passing day added to the prospect of a massive uprising. But the human warship itself faded back into rumor, leaving behind little in the way of signals. Some theorized that it has returned to Earth for a repair or for new missions. Others theorized that it stalked the periphery of the Empire, poised to pounce at the first indication of renewed aggression. That uncertainty drove the Overlord's beleaguered adherents to hide behind planetary shields, not knowing where the unstoppable craft would strike next. Debates roiled in the galactic community. Did Earth now possess godlike power, or was it a one-off? Were the Overlords able to bounce back from their crippling blow, or were they to splinter into competing groups? Scholars of the fields predicted sweeping changes. Trade networks realigned with a future outlook that saw humanity as a potential player or even upstart superpower in the emerging geopolitical sphere. Forever crippled by the warship's audacious strike, the age of Overlord supremacy was coming to an end. In dimly lit halls of Earth's strategic command, planners contemplated their next moves. They saw how quickly triumph could turn disastrous if the Overlords reassembled with new forces. But they also believed they had a window to negotiate from a position of strength. Liberated from fear, Earth might strike treaties out of mutual respect, establishing a new kind of peace. Or, if forced by Overlord vengeance, the push of the relentless would go on, spurring escalations across the galaxy. For the crew that fought that last battle, the reverberations of forging an empire's doom remained. They bore memories of scorching beams, toppling flagships, and the instant they delivered the killing blow. Some felt relief. Others anticipated the cost. The road ahead required vigilance. If humans stumbled, the whole galaxy could fall into a subsistent war. But, if sound judgment triumphed, they could ignite a renaissance of freedom. In the shadowy edges of the fallen empire, extremist loyalists schemed sabotage, of retaking lost ground. Piracy threatened to thrive where Overlord patrols had disappeared. Chaos beckoned, but loomed above all this worry a silhouette of one warship, its name breathed by those who felt awe and fear. The Overlords had underestimated human potential, and in that miscalculation, their empire was broken. As a new dawn unfurled across star charts, humankind's missive to the Overlords rang clear: resist or perish before inexorable power. The Empire's center of gravity no longer felt impenetrable, and in the hush of the battered star system's twilight, where the last duel faltered, the promise of another collision trailed on the cosmic wind. For every Overlord who grasped for illusions of superiority, humanity's war machine played portent, suggesting that a far more significant struggle was dawning over the horizon.